For his 4 years of college, I kind of shepherded him. Now he shepherds me. He's my pastor, and I was excited about it. I didn't know how that would feel, but I've enjoyed it very much. And I look around, and Michael's over here. You graduated the same year Jeff did, in 2006, and then you got other staff here. Aaron was a little after them, right? And Lauren was much more recent. She's a lot younger than all these guys, but it's always good to come back home. And I'm so proud of Jeff and his leadership here, and it is my hope that he stays here a long time. So my sort of just perfect world kind of thing, I may have 40 years left in me. That would make me 100. So in like perfect situation, my funeral's here in 40 years at age 100, and Jeff, who's still the pastor here at Emmanuel, preaches my funeral. So I think I got 40 years left in me, maybe. Only the Lord knows, but that puts the pressure on you to remain here for 40 more years. He's like, get on with the Bible study. So the text we're going to look at this morning was assigned to me. It's John chapter 14, verses 1 through 6. And I want to talk about the I ams in general before I get to this particular passage. But I'm going to start with a song. My generation, and maybe a little older than mine, will recognize this song. I don't know about the younger folk. But Simon and Garfunkel have a song, Mrs. Robinson, which was an incredibly popular ballad like in the 1960s. And the line that I'm interested in is, and I'll sing just a little bit. You feel free to join me. Where have you gone, Joe DiMaggio? A nation turns its lonely eyes to you. There you go. What's that you say, Mrs. Robinson? Joltin' Joe has left and gone away. All right, good job. So that's a very famous song. 60 Minutes did an interview with Paul Simon some years after the song, and in talking about that, he said he received a letter from Joe DiMaggio after the song became popular. And here's what DiMaggio wrote. What do you mean, where have I gone? I haven't gone anywhere. I'm still around selling Mr. Coffee machines. Mr. Simon looked into the camera. Mike Wallace was the one interviewing him, looked into the camera and said, obviously, Mr. DiMaggio is not accustomed to being used as a metaphor. And isn't that true? None of us are accustomed to being used as a metaphor. We don't define ourselves using metaphors like I am something. We're very matter-of-fact and descriptive when we define ourselves, like I am a husband, I am a father, I am a teacher, I am a friend, I am a Christian. Very matter-of-fact ways to describe ourselves. So if I came up to you this morning and said something like, I'm your bridge over troubled waters, to use another Simon and Garfunkel song, or maybe I'm the wind beneath your wings. Or maybe if I wanted to modernize it a little bit and say, I'm not completely necessary in your life, but things don't work very well without me, I might say, I'm the Wi-Fi in the office of your life. I mean, there are lots of ways you could think about using yourself in a symbolic way as a metaphor, but you would worry about me. You would think, he's a bit touched in the head. Maybe he's awfully arrogant to think of himself so highly. The interesting thing is, in John's gospel, that's exactly the way Jesus refers to himself. 7 times, Jesus just says, I am. We'll call those in our study an absolute use of I am. There's no metaphor, there's no image attached, there's no predicate, it's just I am. For example, in John chapter 4, verse 26, he's in a conversation with a Samaritan woman at a well. She says to him, when the Messiah comes, he'll tell us everything we need to know. And Jesus says, I am. And there's 7 of those. But there are also 7 I ams where Jesus provides a predicate, where he gives an image to describe the I am. The first one is in John 6:35, I am the bread of life. In John 8:12, I am the light of the world. There are two in chapter 10. In 10:7, I am the gate for the sheep. In 10:11, I am the good shepherd. In John 11:25, I am the resurrection and the life. 14:6, I am the way, the truth, and the life. 15:1, I am the true vine, and you are the branches. Today, we're going to look at the one in John chapter 14, I am the way, the truth, and the life. When we turn to John 14, we've made a rather significant transition in John's gospel. The first 11 chapters, it's his ministry leading up to his final trip to Jerusalem. When we turn to chapter 12, everything changes. Mary of Bethany anoints Jesus his feet for burial. He rides into Jerusalem on a donkey. That's chapter 12. In chapter 13, he gathers together with his disciples in an upper room. And in the Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the synoptic gospels, he institutes the Lord's Supper. But in John's account, there's no Lord's Supper scene. He washes the disciples' feet. And in that setting, after doing that, in the midst of doing that, or just after it, he also predicts or tells them that one of them will betray him and that Peter will deny him 3 times. But in that chapter 13, when he's washing their feet, when he's telling them what's going to happen, it's part of a discourse that goes from John 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. That's the scene in the upper room, Jesus' farewell discourse. And so after the washing of their feet, after saying, one is going to betray me, Judas, one of you is going to deny me, Peter, then we turn to chapter 14, verses 1 through 6. Do not let your heart be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you that I'm going to prepare a place for you. If I go away and prepare a place for you, I will come again and take you to myself, so that where I am, there you may be also. You know the way to where I'm going. Lord, Thomas said, we don't know where you're going. How can we know the way? And Jesus told him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you know me, you will also know my Father. From now on, you do know him, and you have seen him. And so this text begins with the reality of trouble in this world. The opening words are, don't let your heart be troubled. Now, those words sometimes can be used to sound a little bit trite, maybe a little bit like a cliche. Maybe we even say them sometimes with a little bit of gospel swagger. Well, don't let your heart be troubled. Well, we might drop those words in almost any situation where we're just trying to tell somebody, keep your chin up. Don't worry about your circumstances. Don't let your heart be troubled. But when we recognize what's going on in the life of Jesus and these disciples, at the moment he utters those words, it's a farewell discourse. Goodbyes are never fun. And this is sort of the ultimate farewell discourse where he's telling them he's going to be lifted up, he's going away to the Father, he's going to be leaving them. And I can imagine a certain maybe sense of panic among them, especially in light of just telling them that one of that group is going to betray him to the authorities, and Peter, the leader of the group, is going to deny him 3 times. Sort of feels like for them, I would think, that the wheels are coming off a little bit. I can imagine in that setting when Jesus speaks these words, do not let your hearts be troubled, that maybe there was a little quiver in his voice and maybe a tear in his eye. Everything about the situation indicates trouble. If you go back to chapter 11, that's the first time where the text says that Jesus was troubled. You might recognize John 11. That's where Lazarus has died, and Jesus shows up to resuscitate him, bring him back to life. But the interesting thing about it is Jesus takes his good old sweet time getting to Bethany, even after he's alerted that Lazarus is really sick and you better hurry and get there. He strolls along, takes him two extra days. When he finally arrives at Bethany, Lazarus has been dead for 4 days. And there's an I am in there, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But what he encounters is the sisters of Lazarus, who are close friends. Mary, Martha, Lazarus are 3 of Jesus' closest friends. Lazarus is dead. He's going to raise him from the dead. He's not troubled about Lazarus' death. He's going to resuscitate him. But he encounters the sisters who are crushed, who are weeping. One even angry at him that if you could have gotten here faster, you could have saved him. But now 4 days, it's too late. And it's in that context that we find out he was deeply moved and greatly troubled. The second person of the Trinity, the one co-equal, co-eternal with God, is deeply moved and greatly troubled. It demonstrates his ability to sympathize with human beings in their suffering. He knew he was going to raise Lazarus from the dead. He's not greatly troubled about Lazarus' death. He's grieving, moved, troubled because he sees the suffering of people he cares about. And in that context, Jesus wept. And then in John chapter 12, verse 27, as the hour of his death draws near, we hear these words in John 12:27, now my soul is troubled. Now, this is a context where he said, my hour has now come. He's facing crucifixion, and his response to it at this moment is, my soul is troubled. He's troubled, for the hour of his death is near. That Jesus, the eternal Son of God, could be troubled in the face of crucifixion indicates just how fully he had taken upon himself human flesh. He was fully God, but he was fully human. And he knew the dread of an awful, grisly crucifixion that was yet to come. He says in that context to his Father, should I ask you to save me from this hour? No, it's for this hour that I came. But he was troubled. That's 11, then 12, and then 13. The chapter just before, he says, do not let your hearts be troubled. In chapter 13, verse 21, that's where he's indicated that Judas is going to betray him. And in that context, in the context of predicting his betrayal by a close friend, it says Jesus was troubled in his spirit. In the face of betrayal by a friend, he experiences deep pain. Only someone fully human could know that kind of pain. Jesus is not expressing anxiety in those passages like he's anxious about God's will, or that he's anxious about taking upon himself the sins of the world, or that he's shrinking from the divine will, but to be shaken by the suffering of those you love. The dread of suffering and the humiliation of crucifixion or anguish over the betrayal of a friend are all genuine human emotions. That Jesus feels those emotions in these moments of trouble indicates just how authentically he became flesh and dwelt among us. Only the Jesus who'd been troubled by suffering, who knew the dread of suffering and death, and who knew betrayal by a friend, could authentically say to others in their trouble, don't let your hearts be troubled. And only disciples who faced evil and pain and suffering in life can know the power of the Lord, who in the last moments said, do not let your hearts be troubled. The reality of trouble in this world. It would be remarkable if there weren't people who are here in this 8 o'clock service this morning who would say, I am troubled today. My heart is shaken, maybe a little rattled. You might talk about your heart shuddering, troubled. It's part of living your life in a fallen world. But there's good news here as he goes on in verses 2 through 5, the promise of finding the way home. He said, believe in God, believe also in me. And then in verse 2, in my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I'm going to prepare a place for you? If I go away and prepare a place for you, I will come again and take you to myself, so that where I am, you may be also. You know the way to where I'm going. This is the basis for which he can say to them, don't let your hearts be troubled. Now he starts by saying, I'm going to prepare a place for you. I'm going away. When Jesus talks about going up, when he talks about being lifted up, it's a reference to his death in John's gospel every time. It's a reference to his crucifixion. When he talks about going away, it's a reference to returning to his Father. In that, you can see his death, his burial, his resurrection, and his ascension. It's all sort of part of one whole cloth. So he can talk about his going up, his going away. It's a reference to returning to his Father. And at first, it could give you more grief. It could have caused more panic. I'm going away. But the important part is, yes, I'm going away, but one, I'm going to prepare a place for you. And two, I'm going to come again, and I'm going to take you back to the place that I'm preparing. And the comfort is found that he is, although going away, he is preparing a place for us. The way he describes it, the language he uses is my Father's house. That's where he says he's going. In my Father's house are many rooms. Now, we have to be a little careful here. I noticed in the song that we sang earlier, it mentioned about mansions, something about mansions. You know, the King James translate this, in my Father's house are many mansions, which is not the best translation there. Hey, I love the King James. If you like the King James, we're good. But in that particular spot, mansions is not a good translation. It's a Greek word, monē. We get a verb from it, meno, which means I abide, I remain. They're built off the same stem. It's just a dwelling place. It's not a mansion. I mean, it could be a mansion, I guess, but that's not the point. And when we think of mansions, some of our sort of consumerism, materialism kicks in. That's just part of fallen human beings. You know, we kind of tend to think bigger is better, more is better. We have this idea maybe, you know, if you live better here, you'll have a bigger mansion in heaven. And it's we sort of sanctify that materialism a little bit, and we sort of have this prosperity gospel fitted for heaven. Like, I want a big mansion in heaven, because that would indicate that I was a better Christian, or that I was closer to Jesus, or somehow that says something good, because in this life, we often determine our value by how much stuff we have. We determine whether someone's successful based on what kind of car they drive or what kind of house they live in. And you can sanctify that and make it like I'm mansions in heaven. That's what I'm headed for. And that's not it at all. It's not about the mansion. It's just a dwelling place. And it's not the mansion anyway. In my Father's house. It's not in my Father's house there are many rooms. It's in my Father's house. The thing that makes it desirable is that it belongs to the Father and he dwells there. It doesn't matter if it's a cot in a hostel in heaven. It doesn't matter if it's a suite, if it's a duplex, if it's a split level, if it's a ranch style, if it's a mansion or a castle. None of that matters. It's that dwelling place is where the Father's presence can be accessed. That's the thing that we long for. That's what makes heaven home. I grew up in Kentucky. If you know anything about me, you know I sort of still consider myself a Kentuckian. I could have said I am a Kentuckian when identifying myself earlier. But I moved away from there in 1988, where I'd been born and raised. I was 23 years old, and I moved to Fort Worth, Texas to go to seminary. And I've never lived in Kentucky again since that time in 1988 when I left. And my parents lived in the same house from that time until recently after they both died. For 34 consecutive years, maybe with a miss here and there at either Christmas or in the summer, but from 1988 for 34 consecutive years, I and Angie when we got married, and then I, Angie, and Luke after he was born, and then I, Angie, Luke, and Levi made a trip 2 times a year to Kentucky. Something drew me there. It was hard. Man, after you have kids, taking them there for Christmas, loading up all that stuff in the car, it wasn't easy. It would have been easier to stay home. But I had this draw to go back. And whenever I went back, I went to my mom and dad's house. And then my mother died in 2013. But I still felt the draw to go back to my dad's house. And then in December 2022, he died. And suddenly, I didn't have much desire to go back. In fact, when we sold that house, when we were able to sell that house about a year and a half later, I was so relieved to sell that house because it was so hard trying to take care of things 1,000 miles away. I figured out it wasn't the house. It was that my parents lived there. They were there. Their presence was there. Once they weren't there, that house didn't mean anything to me. It's not the mansion in heaven. It's dwelling with the Father. It's abiding in his presence. That's the comfort. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you that I'm going to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and take you to myself. And then at this point, you think, well, maybe they're kind of getting it, they're understanding. They shouldn't be troubled because this present scene is not the final scene. Things are going to get better. Things are going to turn around. They might look bleak now. I'm going away. Judas is going to betray me. Peter's going to deny me. I'm going to be hung up on a cross. It all looks bleak. But the present trouble is not the final word. There's more to come. And I'm going to return and take you to this place that I've prepared for you. Sounds good, right? He says at the end in verse 4, you know the way to where I'm going. Lord, Thomas said. Thomas said. What's Thomas saying something for? Why is he speaking? He only speaks 4 times. In his whole ministry recorded in 4 Gospels, he speaks 4 times, all 4 in John. And he gets a bad rap because, he says in chapter 20, I have to see the marks in your hands and the spear in the side before I'll believe. That's how he gets the moniker Doubting Thomas. If he'd only known we were going to tag him doubting for the 2,000 plus years, he probably would have found another way to express his concern there. But we forget before that in chapter 11, when Jesus says we got to go to Bethany because Lazarus is sick, and Bethany's a dangerous place for Jesus at that moment in time. And Thomas says, we'll go with you. We'll die with you if we have to. And then he's the one who has the great confession at the end of John, my Lord and my God. That's the only words he has. And yet he's the one speaking in this moment. Thomas said, we don't know where you're going. How can we know the way? It's like classic confusion here. You know the way to where I'm going. And he like scratches his head and he says, well, actually, we don't understand where you're going. And if we don't know where you're going, we certainly don't know the way there. And then if you look down to which I'm not going to deal with it, but you look in verse 8, Lord said, Philip, why is he talking? Where's Peter and James and John and Andrew? Those are the disciples with the speaking parts. Suddenly, we've got these two who say so little. Philip has four times he speaks, all in John's gospel. Peter's probably sulking in the corner because Jesus has told him he's going to deny him. Judas has already gone out to betray him. It probably feels like everything's turning upside down on them. And if things are turning upside down, I guess it makes sense that Thomas and Philip are the two who are speaking. And Jesus' response to that opens up our I am saying. Verse 6, Jesus told him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Now, this is the sixth of 7 I ams. But there's two parts to that saying. First, there's the I am. You could just say I am, but he adds something to it here. But the I am is the first part that we need to think about that. Does that sound familiar? Can you think about somewhere in the Old Testament where maybe God speaks to someone and he uses the language of I am? Exodus 3:14, when he speaks to Moses in the context of the burning bush, and Moses is real nervous about this call he's getting to lead the Israelites out of Egyptian slavery, and so he's got all his complaints and concerns he's given to God, who's speaking to him out of the bush. But one of them is, I don't know if these Israelites will take me seriously. And he says, if I go to them and tell them that you've told me I'm supposed to lead them out of slavery, give me your name. Tell me who I can say sent me. And God says, Eyah Asher Eyah. I am who I am. And then he says, tell them I am sent you. Eyah. Now, Eyah. Can you hear in that the divine name? Yah, Yahweh. The personal name of God, Yahweh, is built off that phrase, that word, Eyah. It's as if somebody's name, God's name, is I am. It's like the to be verb in Hebrew to build a name off of it. I am. That's his name, Yahweh. When Jesus says, I am, he is identifying himself with the one who spoke to Moses out of the bush, whose name is Yahweh. By that little phrase, the use of it, the way he uses it, he is declaring, I am Yahweh. I have divine identity, Father, Son, and Spirit. I am the eternal I am, co-equal, co-eternal with the Father. There's another phrase in Deuteronomy 32:39. It's another I am saying. I'll read you the way it goes. Behold, I, even I am, there is no God besides me. That's Deuteronomy 32:39. Right at the end of the book of the law, God makes a similar claim to what he makes in the burning bush. Now, it's a little different Hebrew phrase, but you know we have a Greek translation of the Old Testament called the Septuagint. In both cases, Exodus 3:14, Deuteronomy 32:39, the Greek version translates it with two Greek words, ego, eimi. Ego, I, it's pronoun I, it's emphatic. I, eimi, I am. Guess what two Greek words John uses to record Jesus saying in these seven, with the predicate and in the seven absolutes? Ego, eimi. The same words that God uses in the Old Testament to identify himself. I am. But he also attaches a predicate here, the way. I am the way, the truth, and the life. Now, in this particular saying, although he says way, truth, and life, way really is the headliner. What leads into it is, well, we don't know where you're going, so we don't know the way. Well, Jesus says, I am the way. It's like if you're looking for a set of directions, if you're trying to put the way into your GPS so you can know which direction to turn when you go out of the parking lot, and then which direction to turn when you get to the light, if that's how you're thinking about where you're going, then you've missed the boat. Jesus is not here to give us a set of instructions. He's not come to show them the way. He is the way. So the way is to follow him. The way is to trust in him. The way is to commit your life to follow him. That's the way. You can't plot it out on a set of directions. You just follow him because he is the way. The way is a person. Now, what's the destination? My Father's house that I prepared for you, which has many rooms. And I told you, it's not about the house. What's it about? It's about the presence of the Father. So the destination is a person, the Father, and the way is a person, the Son. The way you get to the destination, the Father's presence, is to follow the Son, who is himself God. I am the way, the truth, and the life. So I wouldn't put them equal there, although he's going to say the resurrection and the life is another one in chapter 11. But I think what Jesus is saying is, I am the way because I am the truth and I am the life. The truth is embodied. He doesn't tell the truth. He is the truth. It's not that he comes to give life. He is life. He can be the way because he's the truth and the life. So in the context of this great trouble, on a dark and gloomy night, hours before Jesus is arrested and hanged on a tree, he says to his disciples, in the midst of all that trouble, don't let your hearts be troubled. 2020, been about 5 years. OBU started the prison divinity program at the Lexington, whatever, it's assessment and something. It's the maximum security prison at Lexington, Oklahoma. And what Bruce Perkins has done there has been nothing short of amazing. Hundreds and hundreds of people have come to Jesus as a result of having 40 plus students in the OBU program there, getting taught by actual OBU professors, and Bruce down there shepherding them every day. He asked me numerous times to come down to Lexington and speak to the group. And I always had a reason not to. But I got to tell you, I think I had a little anxiety about going down there to the Lexington Correctional Facility, a maximum security prison. Finally, he asked me last spring to come and speak on Maundy, Thursday of Passion Week. And I had no excuse. We were out of school that day, and I just couldn't say no again. So I got my little sermon ready and drove down there to Lexington and pulled in the parking lot there, and you got all the barbed wire and fences, and you enter in there, and I got to tell you, kind of felt like trouble. And I got out, walked in the door. I could see orange suited inmates, different places inside when I'm walking in. I walk in, there's security there, all heavily armed. Well, a good piece of news was Bruce was standing there waiting on me. That helped. But I went through all the security stuff, and finally I came through that. Now I'm on the other side of the entry. Now I'm actually in the prison grounds. They're pointing out, here's where they do this, here's where they bring them in, here's where they do this. And then after we talked a minute, Bruce said, well, let's go down to the cells where our group all stays, which required walking through the yard. Man, I've walked through a lot of yards. Never one like that. Many of these maximum security prison, and I'm just walking through with Bruce and a couple other people, and there's prisoners everywhere. Felt like trouble. Went to the cells and looked around and thought how drab and dark those cells are, almost no light. And then ended up going to the room where they have the classes, the OBU classes, and then to the chapel, where they filled up that room and they started singing, and it was glorious. You can't imagine the way these guys sing hymns and praise songs. It's just different than anywhere else I've ever heard singing. They gave testimonies. I got up and preached, and I mean, they would wear you out with the amens, and afterwards they wanted to talk. And one, his name was Miguel, who's now graduated from our program and is a chaplain, I think, in Holdenville. He said to me, on the outside, I was a prisoner, but inside, I found freedom. In all that trouble, his heart was not troubled because he found the way. Jesus said, I am the way, I am the truth, and I am the life. That's good news when you are troubled. Let's pray.